Hello everyone, welcome. Now this episode is about a new announcement from AWS Amplify team. Now in 1st of December 2020 at reInvent, they have launched this new feature Admin UI for AWS Amplify. Now with Admin UI, you can allow your team members who do not have direct access to your AWS account to manage content and configure resources for your Amplify applications. Now, admin UI is a new interface, guys. So there you have a section to manage the content and also set up and configure backend resources for your application. So you can invite users who do not have a AWS account access either to manage the content and the users of your Amplify applications, or you can provide the full access. They can both manage content as well as set up and configure backend resources. So in this episode, I will create a new application called Bookstore and show you how we can use admin UI to invite a new team member who do not have access to AWS and allow him to manage and set up backend resources. So let's get started. All right, guys. So let's go to AWS Amplify. So I will search for AWS Amplify and go into that. And here I can just get started. Then I can either choose whether I need to develop the backend or I just have to host my web application. Well, I have to develop my application first, so I will just click get started here. Let's give it a name. I will say my app is bookstore. Not sure if the hyphens are allowed. Let's see, yes, hyphens are allowed. So it will take some time to create the admin UI for you. After that, you can manage the entire application from the admin UI. So let me fast forward. Amplify has created the application. So now I get to choose whether I need to deploy the front end or the back end. So I'll go to back end and then I can just click open admin UI. Now this is a separate application outside AWS. If I click here, I can sign out from this application and in the same time I can add more users to this application. So how can I add another user who does not have an AWS account access, but still again I want them to manage my application? So in that case, I can go back to AWS Amplify console. Now here I need to be inside AWS first because I'm the one who invite those users. Then in the left sidebar, I can see admin UI management. Click on that. Now here's the place I'm inviting other users. So I can click invite users. Here, I need to add the email address. Now, this email address does not have to be linked with an AWS account. It can be anything because these users probably do not have an AWS account access. So let me get a 10 minutes email, copy this and go back to my AWS Amplify console. I invite this user. Now I can decide whether I should give them the full access permission or just to manage the application users and the content. Now for this guy, let's say I need to give the full access. Now he could be, let's say, a temporary team member, or he could be intern or anyone really. But I want him to work full time on my project. So then I will send the invitation. So here I have got a new email. So I'll click on that. So now I got the password. That's great. So let me open another browser, Safari. So I'll click and copy the link to the Amplify admin UI and paste it here and hit enter. And by the way, guys, right now this admin UI URL is little ugly. But as soon as you set up a custom domain for your application, then you can access your domain with that custom URL. Let me show you in the documentation if you can see. Let's say you have this https://example.com as your custom domain. If so, then you can add slash amplify slash admin UI as a suffix and then hit enter, then this admin UI will show up. So I'm in my Safari. So let me go to my 10 minutes email and get the username and also the password. Sign in. I have to enter a new password. Here you go. The invited user is now logged in. Now he can see the application really. He can manage the content, users, as well as he can set up all the backend resources because we have given the full access. So I'll leave this user logged in Safari and I'll go to Chrome where I have logged in as the user who created this application. Now let's look at this interface. Now this admin UI allows us to create the backend resources and manage the content. So you can see under the setup section, we can set up the data. That means we can set up all the data modeling in our application, authentication and authorization, Lambda function if we are using in the application, the storage. This could be S3, DynamoDB, or any other AWS storage that we use. We can configure through this. And here the APIs. If we are using GraphQL API with AppSync, we can use that. REST API here. Analytics, prediction, and interactions. Now, these are all categories supported by AWS Amplify. Earlier, we could configure all these things in AWS CLI, still we can. But now they started migrating the management of these categories into the admin UI one by one. So at the moment, we can manage our data modeling. That means we can define our entities and define relationships and authorizations. And also we can create user pool, the authentication aspects of it that can also be managed through AWS admin UI. But functions, storage, GraphQL APIs, so these things we still need to use AWS CLI at least to provision them first. But I believe the Amplify team will add all the support for all the categories in the future. Now still the admin UI is in beta, so let's go ahead and try this out. So our application is bookstore. So let's start creating some data models for our bookstore application. So this is the place we will start defining the entities for application. So I will go to data section and I will click add a model. So the first model in our application is a book because this is a bookstore application. So first we need to store the data about a particular book. Now you can see from the UI we can easily add fields associated with the book. And I will first add the field of a book, that is the title, and that is a required field. Then description, that is a string again, and price. Price is type of float. Add another one, author, so that is also a string. And I'll add another field, is featured, whether this book is a featured book or not. Now this is the Boolean type field, so I select Boolean. And I think this is enough for the fields for the book model. So let's create another model. So now this is the online bookstore. So the users will create orders or the book orders. So let's create another model and we'll call it orders or order rather. And we get this default ID field and I will add another field for the order and let's call this date, and that is of type AWS date, which is this one. And let's add the total, and that is again the float type. And I'll add another field, user or username rather, the username of the user who is placing this order. Okay, great. So we have two entities or the two models defined for our bookstore application. Now we can define some relationship between these two. For example, a book can be part of multiple order and one order can have multiple books. So there's a one-to-many relationship in both sides. So that's a many-to-many relationship. So I'll go to book or I go to order, whichever the case. In this case, I will go to book and I will click add a relationship. And here I have to select the related model. I will select order and then I have to pick the relationship. One book to another order or one book to many orders. And in our case, it is many big book to many orders. Then I can define the relationship name. I will call it orders and save it. And here we go. So it has added this orders relationship and that's a many-to-many relationship. And if you scroll up, the order has also got a relationship set up and the relationship names is book. So order has books and the book has orders. And next we need to add some authorization logics to our books and also to our order models. So why do we need that? For example, the admin user can create books into our bookstore and the signed in users should be able to view the books. And when it comes to orders, the signed in users can create an order. So in order to set up the authorization rules, we are going to use AWS Cognito User Pool. Currently, the authorization mode is set as API key, but we cannot create granular authorization rules with API key. Instead, we need to use AWS Cognito User Pool authorization. But right now it is disabled because we do not have a user pool created for our application. So I will select authentication here. So this is the place we can create a user pool so our users can log into our application through the user pool. First, I need to configure the login. I can either add Facebook, Google, Amazon login, or I can just have a normal login screen. So I will just click add login mechanism. Then I can enable or disable the MFA or multi-factor authentication. It is disabled at the moment. And when the user is signing up, we can define what attributes that he should fill. For example, when he is signing up, I need his name. Then I can use that as a username in our application. Now all these settings can be configured when creating a user pool, and Amplify admin UI gives us a nice UI so we can create it from admin UI itself. Save and deploy. So I'm going to deploy the authentication configuration, which will create a user pool for our application. And I click confirm. So you can see now it is being deployed. And if I click on this, I can see the resources that the CloudFormation is provisioning in our AWS account. I will fast forward until our user pool is deployed. All right, so the deployment is successful. Now I will go back to my data section where I have defined these two models, and let's click books, and I will select the authorization mode drop down. Now I can see the user pool is enabled. So let me click here and change the authorization mode to user pool. I will type change and confirm. Okay, so it is now changed to user pool. So now what I can do is I can set up authorization rules. So let's set up authorization rules for the book. I'll select this one, and from the right side, I will first allow admins to do all the operation for books like creating, deleting, updating and everything. So let's create a separate group. Now I will click group here, and this is going to create an new group in user pool, and I'll create a group, and I can see it here now. Users in the admin group can read books, but now I need to allow them not just reading but also creating books, updating books, and also deleting books. Perfect. But what about normal users? Now, for all the signed in users, so I can just select any signed in users, they should be able to really read the books, or they should be able to view our book catalog. And I have another requirements. That means I don't want users to log into my online store and see the books. Even anyone who just visit my online store, they should be able to view the book. But for that, I need to set up multiple authorization modes for our books entity. But at the time of this recording, the Amplify admin UI do not support multiple authorization modes. You can do that anyways from the Amplify CLI, but you can't do it from the UI yet. So let's leave it as it is. I will just allow my admin users. I don't know why this is unticked, so I will select them again. So all the users in my admin group, they can do everything, but the sign-in users can only read. So these are the authorization rules for the book, and I will select orders as well. And for orders, I only want my signed-in users to create orders and also view their orders. So that's the only rule I am assigning there. So this look great. So I will go ahead and deploy my application schema to AWS. So now admin UI will use AWS CloudFormation to create an AppSync API, and also it will create AppSync schema based on the entities or the data models that we have defined. So let's wait until it is deployed. I will fast forward. All right, so my data model is now deployed. So AWS has now created an AppSync API, and also it has created the schema. So I can query data and also run mutations. Now, how can we connect this backend with our front-end application? Now, as the first step, let's set up all this configuration locally. So here you can see the local setup instructions. Now we have created this Amplify application. We can pull all the configuration that we configured so far using this command, Amplify Pull command with the app ID as a flag. I will copy this one and I will go to desktop and I'll create a new folder. Let's call it Bookstore, cd into Bookstore and open it in Visual Studio Code. So right now there's no front-end code added. So let's use create React app to spin up a React application. I will type npx create React app and we'll call the application Bookstore. Okay, so the React app is created. Let me cd into Bookstore. Now I need to connect to my backend resources like my AppSync API from frontend. For that, I need to pull the configuration that I've already set up from admin UI. Now, in order to do that, we can use this command which will pull all those configuration. But before that, I need to install Amplify. Now, there's this another link for Amplify installation instructions. You can use curl and then install Amplify globally. So I can just copy here and paste it in and hit enter. Or else you can also use npm. You can just use npm i-g aws-amplify CLI and hit enter. So I've already installed it. Now let's pull the configuration. I'll copy this URL and paste it, hit enter. Now it should authenticate me first with Amplify admin UI. Because remember, this could be done by another user who do not have access to AWS. So there's a federation going on. So he needs to first log into the Amplify admin UI, then can interact with AWS. So he need to first log into the Amplify admin UI and get authenticated. So I'll just say yes. So I am being authenticated. So I am now successfully logged into Amplify admin UI. Now I can return to Amplify CLI. So when I'm returning to that, you can see it has already found the bookstore application. Now I can set up. So first I have to choose my editor, that is VS Code, JavaScript and React. I'll just use the defaults. Now these are the defaults for React app. Just accept everything. Then it is asking whether am I planning to modify this backend. Say yes. So now it has fetched all the configuration from my backend app. Now you can see there's a new folder called Amplify has been created. In that you have another separate folder called backend. In that we can see the API that we have defined with the AppSync schema and also the user pool that we have created with AWS Cognito. So let's go to API and in that we can see the GraphQL schema. So let's open that up. And here I can see the entities that I have already configured in the admin UI. The book entity with the attributes that we have defined and also the order entity. And we can see the relationship that we defined. The order has many books and the book has many orders. Now it has automatically created the third type called book order, which is used to set up the many-to-many relationship between order and books. Now here are my authorization rules that I defined. So I am allowing the group admin all the operations, create, read, update and delete. And also I am allowing the logged in users only the reading operation. Now let's imagine our team member who do not have access to AWS want to do some change to the book entity. I will go to Safari because in Safari, if you can remember, we logged in as the other user who do not have access to AWS. Let me refresh it. Now, even though he does not have access to AWS, he can use this admin UI. Let's say he can go to data and he can modify the schema. So let's go to this book entity and let's add a new field. Now he needs to add a new attribute for the image URL of the book. So he will add this attribute and he will set it as the AWS URL data type and then he will save and deploy it. Deploy. So it is being now deployed. All right. So now the new change is now deployed to AWS. And it has updated the AppSync schema and the AppSync API. But now those changes are not visible yet in our local development configuration. So how can we pull those latest configuration that is updated by the other user? We can just take the integrated terminal and we can do Amplify Pull. Now have a look at this. At the moment, we don't have that image URL field, but if I do Amplify Pull, so the pull is successful and you can see the new attribute image URL is synced. So what about the other way around, guys? So if I do some local changes, will they be reflected in Amplify admin? Of course, yes. So let's try that out. Let's add a S3 bucket to store our images. So if I go to storage section, so it is asking me to use Amplify add storage CLI command. So I will copy that, and from my local machine, I will just paste that command Amplify add storage and hit enter. So let's use content because we are creating a S3 bucket, and I will accept the default for the bucket name, and it can only be accessed by auth users, because our application is not currently work for guest users since we have not configured that multi-auth functionality. So I will just select auth users, and authenticated users can create, read and delete images or files. Hit enter. All right. So next I will do amplify push to push my local changes to AWS. Continue. All right. So the resources are now updated in the cloud. So if I log into the Amplify UI of the user who do not have access to AWS, then I'll do a refresh here. So that user can go to storage, and when he go there, he will see the resource that was provisioned and pushed by the user who has access to AWS. So here he can see the resource name and the last modified time. And maybe in the future, Amplify team will add more information about the resource, even for the user who do not have access to AWS. So what else this user can do? Now currently, this user can go to the content section and he can add data to our tables, like the order table and the book table. Now if I click book table, you can see there's an interface and also there's a button to create a book. So he can just create a book. And he can fill up all these attributes. He can link the book to a order and so on, and also he can add an image URL and then he can save the book. There you go. So this user do not have access to AWS, but through the admin UI he can create books, or he can like manage the orders as well. And in the same time he can go to user management section and manage the users in our bookstore application. Now these users are the users of our bookstore application. So he can create a user, and here you go. And also he can go to a particular user and either delete his account or suspend his account. He can mark the email of the user as verified and give it a name, because if you can remember, we were asking for a name and this user has not entered the name. And he can also go ahead and add this user to the admin group, and he can do all of these things without logging into AWS. So this is what I want to show you in this video. And Amplify Admin UI really is the management of your mobile application or web application by allowing your team members who do not have AWS accounts to manage your application content, users in the application, as well as with full access, they can create backend resources and configure them as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in another video.